Good afternoon, everyone. Taking a look at China's 70-year floods early and in the main rice-growing region of the country. United States, we lost 10% of our crops. Massive floods, Midwest, South America in on the carnage as well. Do you think our food prices are going to go up? Going to start you over here in Pingjiang, the Miluo River in Hunan province of China, 23 feet above the alert level. And the actual height of that river at the time, 77 meters or 225 feet. Images are starting to come out. This is the biggest flood since 1954 and the highest water levels, which actually smashed those records by several feet, some places 9 feet higher than the 1954 record. Aerial views, you're going to want to look at the river bend there with all the high-rise buildings as we move forward. Everybody's trapped. They need to be rescued by boat. So China declares wartime emergency situation, meaning they're sending the entire military there because this is so all-encompassing. And you know how China doesn't like to really leak out how bad it is, but major cities all look like this. No power, no water, and if you haven't had any food or any way to cook it in your home, you're stuck there for another week or two. Well, that's that same lip or bend in the river that we saw earlier, a little bit close in. But here's where it gets interesting. The floods have, encompassed the entire countryside where they're growing their early season rice crop. And another factoid, 8 times 3, that's 24 feet in 24 hours. So this river was coming up and a foot per hour. Caught an enormous amount of people off guard. So if they're saying it's just in the thousands or whatnot, most times you need to multiply by hundreds, in these events. And the screen grab again, 1954, but this absolutely broke through those records. And even with all the new flood control that's been installed since the 1950s, it just overwhelmed any type of modern defense against floods. Enormous amounts of pictures are coming out. Bridges washed away, different types of dams washed away, people floating, roads gone. And then it hit the second-tier cities, third-tier cities, fourth-tier cities, and then out into the countryside. Nowhere was spared. So I wanted to spot Hunan province for you here, and also Jiangxi next to it, Hubei a little bit to the north. All these three provinces are experiencing the same thing. This is just a non-stop biblical rain event. Now, South China Morning Post, they're telling you that the rivers have started flooding far earlier than normal this year. Hence, the early season rice crop has been flooded and destroyed. Doesn't usually get this heavy. It floods every year, don't get me wrong, but at this level, it's months ahead of where it should be, at least 6 weeks or so. So when we look at the early rice on a double crop rotation, 13% of the entire year's production, but Hunan, 26%, and Jiangxi. So that's 50% of that 13% is pretty much gone or very close to being gone. I wouldn't say down to zero, but it will be substantially reduced. Speaking of digestive issue, this is caused by a potential toxin that's in all of the, quote, healthy foods that scientists have long been telling us to eat with a fraudulent food pyramid for the longest time. This potential toxin causes digestive issues according to Dr. Gundry, a world-renowned cardiologist. This is affecting millions of people nationwide. Warning signs include weight gain, fatigue, digestive discomfort, stiff joints, and skin problems. I can assure you that the damage is probably caused by these healthy foods. The good news is you can easily help fix the problem from your own home. You can find this information yourself, gutcleanseprotocol.com/adapt. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/adapt. Because after years of research, Dr. Gundry has decided to release an informative video to the public for free, showcasing exactly which foods you need to avoid. gutcleanseprotocol.com/adapt, or click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video. And if we look at the areas here coinciding on the map, Xinjiang is right there in the Miluo River. We got Wuhan a little bit to the north, and we are all familiar with Wuhan and Changsha. So if you follow the red dots, this is record flooding. Purple is what would be considered the old records, these red dots. And then if you go north of Nanjing, also north of Shanghai. So you can see it's that line going from south to north and to the east. This entire area is a flood zone. All of the crops at this time are in jeopardy. Not wanted to be mentioned. Oh wait, Hong Kong mentioned it. Recent floods in China threatening the country's harvest of early season rice, amongst others that are being planted. What do you think the corn's doing? And then if we fast forward into the main rice production, we can see these same areas here. Follow that Hunan, Jiangxi, all the way up to Jiangsu. That goes past Shanghai to the north. That whole belt right there is their rice belt. Massive floods, record floods through the entire rice belt. And it just makes you wonder how they're going to get enough food for the year. Well, their answer would be to import it anywhere at any cost so there are not food riots in the country. This puts us in kind of a conundrum. They're going to buy every available pound, not ton, pound, bushel available on the entire planet. Now keep in mind, they weren't getting that much grain from Ukraine, but since Ukraine's exports of 20 plus million tons have disappeared, those other countries, usually in Africa, are now looking to other places like Russia, the EU, etc., to bring in the grains that were lost out of the Ukraine. But then China is also vying for these same grains, mainly in South America. So what happens down there? Oh, they had record floods too. And their stored grain got wet along the banks in their facilities. But I wanted to jump into America because this makes no sense. And once you see all these puzzle pieces swinging together, you're going to go, oh, wow. And some of the images coming out, these are, 150-year-old railway bridges. Mississippi, Minnesota, Missouri, highest levels in a decade, massive flooding. So they're looking at more than 20 river gauges in the upper Mississippi. Now all that water is coming downstream as well. Another dam collapsing. This was quite the famous one that made its way around the Rapidan Dam, and you can see after the flood how much it scoured away the riverbank. Corps of Engineers going to have to refill that and then rebuild it or just blast it and let it go free. But it does point to our aging infrastructure, and that's another thing not widely talked about. China has the same. A lot of aging infrastructure that is being inundated, especially their levee systems. They're breaking left, right, and center, flooding more farmlands. So the map of flood and high flow conditions, extreme floods are the black dots. So you can see where it's centered to the east. Then we get up into Nebraska again. They had massive floods a few years back, 2016, I do believe it was. But we're getting some of these same flood out, washout areas. And then these historic floods are now on our farmlands. Millions of acres. South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, underwater, and again, it's going to be greatly diminished yields or go down to zero. 3 million acres, at least, of soybean and corn, what they have registered so far. And even CBS News coming out talking about historic rainfall. Is it going to push up your food price? And I would say this event by itself, maybe no, but with everything else intertwined, high possibility. So but they're putting it as a 1,000-year flood, billions of bushels and acres lost. And I thought, okay, the prices have to be going up, but people are seeing this event. Now, overnight, if you're looking at non-corn specific crops, they are starting to rise. And James rightly points out the USDA was at least 1 million acres high on corn and beans, soybeans last year. At least. They're always high, and then they revamp the numbers, and then, oh, look how good we were. They're a market stabilizing agency. They have nothing to do with agriculture except stabilize the agriculture price. But if we go to farms.com, there's a completely different take on it here. 1,000-year floods, same. But then when you look in blue, that's 10% of all of our corn and soy. 15 inches to 18 inches of rain in less than a week. And somehow, when we look at the USDA report that came out after these floods, they're saying that it's going to be record production. And they're stating 91.5 million acres planted, 3.4 million acres unplanted, and beans coming across at 86 million with 12.8 million unplanted. And they're somehow dropping the price during record floods, and they're astounding. There needs to be some accountability with the USDA on this one here. And then as we look at the Mississippi flood river stage cruising down, and this is going to do the same thing it did last time. It is going to flood out what is stored along the Mississippi. Those grain storage facilities are going to get inundated, and they're going to wick that water up through, whether it's a warehouse or a silo. We're going to lose grains that are stored in addition to what's lost in the fields. Highest ever recorded for summer. Mississippi River flooding. Now, the reason I would say that, I want to take you down to Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. They had once in a 1,000-year flood, destroyed an enormous amount of corn and soy in the fields. But also the same phenomenon occurred. All the stored grains they had very close to the riverside were all flooded out, and the amount of grain lost just from flooding is astounding. So put it in perspective now, where's China going to get the grains from? So South America experienced staggering losses, flooding on the rivers as well. We are experiencing staggering losses. 10% of our total corn and soybean crop, that's a lot. And then we got Ukraine completely offline. I doubt if they'll even pull in a couple million tons this year at best. They're in a war over there. Then we got China being flooded out in its major growing regions, specifically rice. So the world's food supply is getting real tight. So if you look at the carryover stocks from the USDA as well, and their numbers are fictitious as all get out. So the amount of real grains out there for anybody to buy and process. Now, a lot of countries are worried about food riots at the moment. As well they should be. Food's going to get way more expensive. Get ready for it. Thank you for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. Share with your friends and family. See what they think about the info and if they think food prices will rise. I appreciate you watching. Bye for now.